on. Let me try to share the screen and then we'll get started. Should be seeing slides now. Everybody, welcome. I'm Captain Gress. Miss you guys. Hope you had a wonderful holiday weekend. This kind of came from, I was on a crew deadheading out to Dover. They were leaving from El Paso and kind of ran into a issue with what they were going to do for their departure instructions. And so it brought about a discussion that I wanted to have with the rest of you. This is all new information, so this is what I've gleaned from just reading the 202 myself, talking to some of our evaluators, as well as some of the AAS slides that you'll see later. So if I get to the end of the slide and you want to say something, just please turn the mic on and start going, and we'll have more of a discussion. So there you were, KELP, runway 22. So you know that most of the time we park in the air cargo area over here when we're at ELP. And it's an easy taxi back and forth to runway 22. Only problem is you have the mountains just over here to your right that are causing all kinds of climb gradient issues. So you look at the El Paso takeoff minimums, and you look. So you got to note there's a pretty standard climb gradient for runway 26. You see nothing for 22, but you do see a departure procedure. So it's climbing left turn, 120, ELP radial 150 to 9,000. So you remember that for later. And then you also see some departure, SIDs, and RNAV SID with a note, 500 feet per nautical mile. This is something that you're going to more commonly see as we progress into the rest of the year. They are trying to make aircraft use or switch on their autopilot a little bit earlier after takeoff. I can't describe how that correlates to a higher climb gradient. Somebody else can at the end of presentation, but you're going to start seeing a lot of these notes, especially on the RNAV departures that say this climb gradient. So then ATC gives you this clearance. So clearance delivery says radar vectors, then is filed, and then tower, you're lining up, and tower says fly runway heading to 8,000. What do you do? So here's your options. You got A, follow the most restrictive climb gradient, B, follow ATC instructions, or C, follow the departure procedure. I'll let you kind of make your own decision and then see if you made the right call. So getting into it, this is from the 202. So let me minimize my screens here. All right, so I'm just gonna go dissect this sentence or this paragraph sentence by sentence. So basically it's saying ATC must give you instructions that are compatible with published departure procedures. Therefore, pilots, and this is the most important part, must fly the ODP prior to ATC departure instructions, except when departing via a DVA or a radar vector SID. I'll give examples of those later on in the presentation. Then it gives another sentence. If departure instructions conflict with ODP or you have terrain in your way, you need to query the controller. And again, we're always responsible for terrain clearance no matter what departure method we use. And then I put a note down there. So the 202 Vol 3 no longer says you have to fly the most restrictive. So option A is not really valid anymore because if there is another diverse departure or departure instruction, then you can choose to fly that since it's published. Just looking at the chat here. Yep, query the controller. We did, and they told us to give us radar vectors. Cool, cool. I'll go over the answer momentarily. So next slide here. I can unfreeze the computer. There we go. So it's just an example of a diverse vector area. So ELP is not a diverse vector area because in the takeoff minimums, you did not see any kind of subjugation of any sectors for being able to give radar vectors lower than the MSA. And so headings are assigned by ATC, you can see for all runways, but then you see runway 8. If you're taking off runway 8, you have a big climb gradient to mess with and a speed restriction as well. And then radar vector SIDs, you're going to see most of the time just these big, departure procedures, but they're not going to have the solid black lines you're used to, just the nav aids. And they're going to say climb to a heading and then climb to an altitude, then accept radar vectors at whatever altitude it's listed. So going back, and here we'll kind of answer the question, So you have this departure procedure of the heading and the radial and altitude. Do you accept that, or do you accept the ATC fly runway heading 8,000? So since the ATC instructions conflicted with the departure procedure that is already published, you are expected to fly the departure procedure and then accept radar vectors after you've flown the departure procedure. So the ELP crew in this case queried the controller, said we're required to fly the departure procedure, we'll accept radar vectors afterwards, and the controller was fine with that. Another thing that we'll go over momentarily too is that the Air Force is now allowing you to use see and avoid a little bit more freely, but at the same time, you're giving up some of that warm fuzzy that a published procedure would give you, because now you're responsible for clearing any obstacles that may exist within that 3 miles of the airport. So this is kind of going into the advanced instrument school slides that help me understand the new 202. And I highlighted the 5 that I thought from the hot topics that were the most different. So I'll let you read through them as you see fit, but no longer required to fly IFR to the max extent. Next one, VFR departures do not require any of IFR climb gradient performance. Pilots may depart using non-standard takeoff mins now. So a couple things that were drilled to us in pilot training for the past 20 years is that we cannot see and avoid, and we cannot use non-standard takeoff mins. Those regulations have been relaxed, but if you're going to use them, you need to understand what you're dealing with and what risk you're accepting. And then pilots can laterally clear low closed-in obstacles. And then we just have the 16-foot departure and crossing restriction for IKO. A lot of us have dealt with that already, but I'll go over a note in a second that you need to remember. So VFR departures, see and avoid, and it just talks about you must have minimum VFR weather. And then IFR departures, here's the departure end screen height here. Note, so look at the second bullet. Even though some new FAA USA procedures are designed with 0-foot screen height, pilots will still use the 35 feet in accordance with the AIM. And so if 35 feet screen height is mission impacting, call MAGCOM TERP's office to verify 0 feet is an option. So you're still using 35 feet, even though it can be anywhere between 0 and 35 feet, and you have to call an agency to use anything less than that. So diverse departure example, I just put this one on here because if you're seeing diverse departures are acceptable for all runways, but then you see in the departure procedures that you have procedures to follow, you can't just fly a diverse departure because you want to use that method. If a departure procedure exists, it's going to supersede the diverse departure option. And then ODP examples, I really like this one because it was color coded. So you got red, non-standard takeoff mins, blue. I mean, you guys can read. The important thing about this is the next slide here that says if you have a departure procedure, you need to comply with both takeoff minimums and departure procedure. Just because you see a departure procedure doesn't mean, oh, well, I can just climb 200 feet for nautical mile because there's a departure procedure protecting me from obstacles. And you'll see runway 22, you need that the weather ceiling there or standard with min climb of 222. So you still need the 222 to 900 feet, even if you're following the departure procedure. And then non-standard takeoff mins, we're allowed to use them now, but they exist because there is an obstacle in your flight path. And so you just don't want to say, oh, the weather's good enough without determining what obstacle is causing that non-standard takeoff ceiling that you need to comply with. Otherwise, that is definitely not the smartest option to avoid any obstacle that may exist on the airfield.
Hey, Stu, can you go back one slide?
This one?
One more? Oh, no, yeah, that one.
Sure.
What about the SIDS? Does the SID stand alone still?
Yes, so that note is still in the 202, and I read that, and it's like bolded and highlighted and everything, so yes. And they use those exact words. All right, and then specific ATC instructions. So this kind of circumnavigates back to our initial question. Can we accept the runway heading to 8,000 feet? For me personally, I would still query the controller, but the 202 says that the ODP is implied with ATC departure instructions. So in this case, even if they give you runway heading to 8,000, it is implied that you still follow the ODP instructions, except when you're doing a DVA or when you're flying a radar vector SID. We went over both of those examples, but it's expected that you fly the departure procedure and then accept radar vectors afterwards if one is published. If you plan on doing anything else or there's confusion, you need to query the controller. And like I said, it even says query the controller in the paragraph for its instructions. All right, that is it. Does anybody have any questions or want me to go over any of the other slides?
Hey, I got a question for you. It's Morgan, by the way.
Hit me.
All right, I'm super kind of now confused about all of this. You know, the old fate hat in me is like, what are we trying to do? So
Right.
if we have it, so you're telling me that, and you're super right, I'm just trying to figure this out, is if they give me runway heading up to 8,000, right? But the ODP says I can't fly runway heading. I have to, you know, fly 190 to 9,000. I just tell the controller that's what I'm going to do, and we're good to go.
So yeah, so in the ELP example, and the crew, we were like going back and forth to what to do, and we queried the controller, and the controller was expecting you to fly. You know, they were expecting runway heading to 8,000, but then we said we're going to do the ODP because it's published, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. So I think it's just more something that we have to watch out for, that if there's a departure procedure where, per the 202, we're expected to fly the departure procedure. This note that I have up right here, that the ODP is implied from the AIS slides, I didn't really find that as much in the 202, but maybe I just like wasn't looking in the right area. But I did find a lot about you will fly the departure procedure and then accept radar vectors afterwards, unless you are in those two cases where you're at DBA or radar vector SID.
Awesome. Thanks, man. That clarified a ton. You're a hero.
Yeah. Which that's why I'm always going to ask, because the tower expected us to fly runway heading to 8,000 because, you know, they don't know our climb gradient and they're dealing with civil traffic all the time. And we can also technically use like see and avoid if we need to, but then there's no way you're knowing for a fact that you're clearing those mountains without following the ODP in that case. So.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. That really helped clarify it for me. Thank you.
All right. Good. Anybody else? All right. Well, enjoyed it, you guys, and Jeff will be posting the video. If anybody missed the beginning, I'll stick around for further questions if anybody missed the first half.
Short, sweet, and simple. You rocked it.
Thank you, man. That's all I was trying to do. So I think it was good to learn about that on that mission. So, and then it was nice to have these AIS slides too that made it super clear.
Yeah, man. Especially since we're changing like everything we've been doing for the past 10 years. So
yeah, exactly. And Loftus was helping me with these AIS slides, but I can post those too if people want to look through them, because I always love the hot topic stuff that they do that just summarizes and like, look, you got 2 sentences, tell them what they need to know. I like those.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, sweet. Thanks, dude.
Yep. See you later.
Yep.